I'm Mike Calandra. I'm 9th Dan in Isshin-Ryu Karate under Master Kichiro Shimabuku, and we're going to talk about the bow. So, this is your typical Okinawan bow. This is a Shiredo bow. Most people are using 6-foot bows. So let's talk about measuring the bow in terms of our height. So, I'm about 5'7", so obviously the bow is longer than me. So we often hear that when we use the bow, it should be in thirds. It should have equal parts, a third here, a third in the middle, and a third here. Well, if my bow is 6 feet, that's not correct. So the middle section of the bow will have to be a little bit smaller. So I'll have an equal part here and an equal part here for most of the techniques, unless I'm extending the bow on certain techniques. So we're here and here. If we go a third and a third when we're shorter than 6 feet, then when we do certain techniques, our hands won't be in the right position. We won't be able to generate the power. Okay? So let's talk about grip. So we don't want to grip over the index finger. We want to grip over the second finger. We want the grip to be relaxed. We don't want it crazy tight. Okay? The other thing is as we're switching grips, we do not want the hand to lose contact with the bow. So for my Isshin-Ryu friends, we have plenty of video of the founder doing Kobudo, and in a lot of the videos, he's actually doing this and taking his hand like this. What you need to realize is when those videos were filmed, most of the first generation students did not know any of those Kobudo kata. They had only learned Tokumini no Kun and Kian no Sai on Okinawa, and as he added kata that he had learned from Shinken. So in those videos, you'll see he's exaggerating, switching his grip, so they can see on the video that at that point in the form, you change your grip. However, when you change your grip, your hand does not lose contact with the bow. So this right here is an excellent exercise, okay? Where you just change your grip like this and you don't use contact with the bow. And you'll see after doing this for about a minute, you'll start to really feel it in your forearms. So it's a good exercise to work on not switching by there being space between your hand and the bow. You always want, right? So no matter what move I'm going to, right, you want the hands to stay on the bow and not release the weapon, okay? In actual combat, you don't want to be doing this, okay? If your opponent is paying attention, he'll disarm you. Take your bow right out of your hand. All right? So let's talk about thrusting strikes first. Okay? So first things first, where do we want to put the power? So if I'm striking someone with the bow and I want to thrust and hit them with the end of the weapon going forward, first off, that thrust has to be on a line. Okay? Has to be on a line. So whether I'm just here and doing a nuki strike, which is similar to like a jab, or whether I'm doing a thrust, right, where both hands move forward, okay, we want the bow to be on a line. Some things we don't want to do. We don't want to hit the bow up into our armpit. You see this a lot in Isshin-Ryu, okay? This is a mistake, okay? If I'm hitting my armpit with the bow, that's where I'm focusing some of my power. I'm supposed to be focusing the power in the tip of the weapon. So the power has to go forward, has to go forward. So the bow is underneath my arm, right? But it's not up in my armpit, okay? So it's underneath my arm. So I'm also 6th Dan in Matayoshi Kobudo. In Matayoshi Kobudo, the bow is on the outside of the arm. So you'll see a lot of some Matayoshi practices do this dramatic a bend. That's not correct. So the bend should be very slight. So the argument of is the bow better on the outside of the arm or inside the arm? In Isshin-Ryu, I practice it inside the arm. In Matayoshi, I do it outside. I think they're both very valid methods, okay, of using the bow. Both have pluses, both have minuses, okay? So we want our focus to go forward into this tip. So as I'm thrusting forward, we want this to come straight in, right? Without doing this. So people like to do this. They like to hear the noise. First off, it's very unhealthy. You're hitting the bow up into your arm. Why do you want to strike part of your body with a hard staff for years and years if you're training years and years? So you want that control where you still have power, but it's thrusting. And it's not doing this. And when you do this, the tip has a tendency to come down, as you can see. So the power is not going on a line. We want that power to go in on a line, okay? So whether it's this, so if I'm stepping over and thrusting with both hands, it's still the same thing. So we want that power on a line, and not up here in the armpit. As a general rule, you're not hitting your body with the bow, okay? Again, if you're doing a swing and you're hitting your body, you're focusing your power into hitting yourself. You want to focus your power into the part of the bow that's striking the opponent. So in weapons training in general, right, one of the things we talk about all the time is don't strike the opponent with your hands. Strike them with the weapon, okay? So if I'm doing, like we've been talking about, a thrust, I want that power to go forward. I want it to go forward. So as it goes forward, all my power is behind there, right? And I want it line and back, line and back. So for instance, if you practice Isshin-Ryu, the first few movements of Tokumini no Kun, we're in Kamae, right? We step over, right? We thrust, we thrust, we thrust, okay? So we want everything to be very crisp and come back in a line. We don't want to be hitting ourselves in the armpit. Big no-no, okay? If you were instructed that way, I don't know what to tell you, but you need to remember, especially when it comes to Isshin-Ryu, that there was not a lot of Kobudo instruction for many of the first generation students, okay? So some of these things that are in Isshin-Ryu, it's up to us to thrust it. So the power goes forward, don't bring it up and hit yourself in the armpit, it just comes under the arm, and comes back, okay? So, let's talk about some blocks. So, if we want to do a head block, we want to come up, we want to be outside here, we don't want our arms locked, we want this action, okay? If we're blocking to the side because someone's coming in to strike on a 45-degree angle to our head, then we can turn this way or we can turn this way, okay? If someone's striking to the middle of our body and we're coming in with a block like this, our elbow has to be in. So the bow, I'm facing you straight on. My body has to be behind the bow. I can't be like this. Then my arm's being struck. So the problem is if you don't do a lot of kumiwaza, bow versus bow and application techniques, you won't figure this out. And if you have a partner who isn't striking for you, but is striking for your weapon, you'll never figure this out. So one of the things you have to do is when you're practicing partner practice, you have to make sure your partner is actually striking for the target on your body. Often I see people doing demonstrations of bobo kumite, bosai kumite, whatever, okay? All the action is taking place out here in the middle between the two opponents. No one is ever going for an actual target. They're just hitting the guy's bow. So one of the things that we practice in my dojo is we stand there and we let the guy come in with the strike. Let's say he's striking to our neck. So we let him come in and stop the strike right here. Now we put our block up. Now we do the next technique. He does the next strike. We let him do the strike, then we do our block. This way we get into the habit of going for target. Plenty of times when I'm practicing with one of my students, they'll come in with a strike and go to strike me, let's say, in the side of the head, or we usually do the side of the neck for safety, and I don't move. And the bow literally just sails by me, and the tip is somewhere out here where it should be striking me here. And then the student rolls his eyes like, oh yeah, my bad, I have to come in for target. So that's very important, okay? So elbow has to be in, and one of the ways you can check this, you have someone put a bow here and press down hard, and this should feel rock solid. rock solid, okay, in terms of power. Like you shouldn't be able to push your bow in. If you're in the right alignment, this should be very, very strong. Notice how I'm looking under the arm, all right? So, same thing on the other side. Notice I didn't reverse my grip, so we could do it this way. The elbow has to be in, and we're here, okay? And it's the same type of action, all right? If I'm doing this block, which we have in several of our Isshin-Ryu Kata, and virtually every one of our Matayoshi Kobudo Kata, you see this move in many, many Bo Kata in Okinawa, okay? So what you want to do is, you want this to come slightly circular down, right? So it's on my hip. I'm here, which when I'm here, I'm in Kokutachi. Then when I turn and thrust with the weapon, right? And this again is a nuki strike, okay? My feet go to Zenkutsu or Seisan stance, all right? So when I'm here, it's here and then here. So when you do it quickly, it's a very smooth transition, okay? The other thing is the position of the elbow when you do the nuki. So I don't want my elbow out. I want my elbow tucked in, and I want my hand like this. And the reason I want that is, it becomes like your forward hand when you're shooting pool. So if you move that forward hand, you're gonna miss the cue ball. Well, it's the same thing here. That forward hand is aiming at your target. It doesn't move, right? This just comes in and thrusts, okay? So we don't want this, and we don't want the bow going all over the place. So this arm has to be tucked in and locked, and then we thrust, and then the bow goes right to its target. In this case, the toes, the foot, the shin, the knee, you can actually redirect this to strike high too, even though usually in the kata, we're striking low. Okay? So let's talk about Kakeuke. So Kakeuke is our circle block. You'll see a lot of people do this to knock the bow aside. The problem is you've overblocked. Now you've created yourself an opening here. So what you want to do is, as the bow strike is coming in to strike you, and remember this is usually a thrust, right? So as the bow strike comes in, I want to wrap my elbow around the bow. So watch the tip of my bow. See how the tip of my bow deflects? I don't care if the bow misses me by a foot, 2 feet. I prefer if the bow misses me by a smaller margin, because then I can come right into counter. So this actual technique, when done, you deflect his bow and come back down, you immediately strike his hand. So as the thrust is coming in, you deflect and strike the hand in one action. So some kata, we deflect, draw back, and thrust, that's fine too, okay? But what we don't want to do is do these big actions. The other thing we don't want to do with the weapons, which I see a lot of this, is wind up, okay? So when I'm here and I'm doing my thrust, I don't want to draw my hand all the way back. I'm pulling the bow back, right? So what I want is, I want the bow to go forward right away. So as I step, the bow goes with me. As I step, the bow goes with me. So it's not 1, 2. 1, 2, okay? It's here, 1. Now, for beginners first learning the weapon, this is fine. Beginners first learning the weapon, this is fine. Now, what you can do from here is, for a beginner, as the body goes forward, the hand can stay where it is in space. Then he thrusts, okay? But later on, as you become more proficient, the hand only goes forward. Remember, if you draw the bow back, you're telegraphing. So there should be no retreat, there should be no load, there should be no wind up in martial arts. I see this in a lot of the empty hand kata, and I see it in a lot of the weapons kata. It's a big no-no, okay? So again, so we're here, right in, right in, okay? If I'm doing the thrust as opposed to the nuki, right, the Suki strike, right, here, right? So both hands have to go. So your feet have to become very fast. Your feet have to be able to move, okay? This very static, no. That's okay for beginners. Once you become proficient with the weapon, your technical ability has to go way up, okay? So if you're still doing bow kata the way you learned it when you were a brown belt or a green belt, and now you're a, third degree, fourth degree, fifth degree black belt, something's not right. So your kata level needs to go up. The handling of the weapon, ability-wise, needs to go up. Okay? So again, for that kakeuke, the elbow curls around. So I'll move in here, and you can see close, right? All I do is this. That's all I do. So it becomes a pivot. See how it deflects it right to the outside, right? So here, and then right back in. Okay? So, all right, so just some things to consider. Okay? Let's talk about some swinging strikes. So, swinging strikes, it's very important to use both hands. So often I see people when they do bow, the left hand, if the right hand is striking forward, the left hand's not doing much. Okay? So this should be a push-pull. So the left hand's pulling, the right hand's pushing. Okay? And it should almost be like there's an invisible pivot point here in the middle of your bow. Okay? So that pivot point, when I come here, that pivot point is here. Okay? Notice I'm not smashing my arm. If I do it under the arm, it's the same thing. Okay? So you want that. So again, if I'm striking top of the head, okay? If I'm striking from here, it's that same two hand. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm pretty sure I'm doing that. Well, I would go back and recheck yourself. You might find that the left hand is more going for a ride than it's actually doing something. So you want, from the side, you want this action. You want this pulling, that striking. Okay? So, and that's on all of them. Doesn't matter if it's the middle, doesn't matter if I'm going for the knee or the ankle, doesn't matter if I'm going for the side of the head, doesn't matter if I'm going for the top of the head. If I'm coming up underneath with a strike like this, it's the same thing. The right hand has to pull, the left hand has to push. And that's the only way you'll get a lot of speed and power. Okay? So it's a constant push-pull when in using both hands with the weapon. Okay? So again, if you look at my hands now, you'll see there's smaller space in the middle than there is on either end. Okay? And because of my height, that's what I want to do. Also, as you're doing certain swings, your hands within bow kata should be moving constantly. They shouldn't be where they're like locked here, right? Like for plenty of beginners in my dojo, they put a piece of tape in the beginning in the two spots where their hands should be for a good portion of their kata, all right? But again, once they learn and get to a certain thing, that tape comes off. Because now they know where their hands should be, they don't have to worry about it. So you can do little things like that in the beginning to cheat and help you remember where your hand should be. Okay? So let's talk about a big strike. Okay? So this is a very popular strike you see in many bow kata. Okay? So when I'm striking with the bow, my hand and wrist have to be behind the weapon. So if I'm like this, now this becomes weak. So my hand and wrist have to be behind the strike. So if I come up underneath, my hand and wrist have to be behind the strike. Okay? So this is important on all strikes. If I'm doing a block, my hand and wrist and arm, so you'll see here, see how the bow is in line with my arm? You can't even see my lower arm, right? So you see when I turn a little bit this way, you'll see it, right? But here, so I don't want this. Now it's not behind. I don't want this, right? So I want this, right? Where it's in line with, right? So when the power comes in, the structure of my arm and my wrists receive it and enables you to block. Okay? So now, these strikes. So first off, stop hitting yourself with the bow. Now, you're gonna probably hit yourself very lightly. Again, you want the power to be in the spot of the bow that you're striking the opponent with. if you're putting the strike and hitting yourself in the side, and you like doing that because it makes a noise and you think that sounds good and everything, okay, again, I'm training over 43 years. I don't want to be hitting myself in the side for 43 years with a hard staff. It's just not healthy, okay? So this strike here. So if I do my normal grip and I come around to do this strike, I want you to see how locked out my arm is, okay? So I can't really generate the power I want to generate. So my hands are too far apart, okay? I see this all the time in people doing bow kata. Now if you look, you'll see my wrist is behind the strike. I also see this all the time. So if you're striking with the bow like this, okay, that means you've never hit anything with the end. Because if you hit something with the end, you'd realize the first time you sprained your thumb, you'd make sure that the hand's behind the strike from now on, okay? All my fingers are on the weapon, okay? So I don't do this. Again, if you see me do that, that's my mistake. You shouldn't do it, okay? So fingers are around the weapon. So let's talk about this strike. So what I do on this strike is I adjust my hands. So now look how close my hands are to each other. So now, if I'm here and this strike is now here, right? Like in Tokumini no Kun when we do it, the way we do it in Isshin-Ryu, right? So now when I start here, you see where my hands are. They're in my good spot, right? But now as I do this, right? Okay, and I do this strike, now when I come back, look at how the space is shrunk between my hands. Okay? Remember, you have to be able to generate power and speed with the weapon. If you can't, because your hands are like this, and your arms are kind of, because you're all stretched out and stuck, no good. So from here, I make my adjustment, and my hands get smaller. So now, for instance, if I'm doing urashi, right? Now I'm putting the power in the tip, and I'm not hitting myself in the back. So you want to be able to generate that power. And you can see too what? So you see my head doesn't move. There's a rod through my body, right? And my hips can rotate around that rod. I cannot do this. Low level technique. So when I'm here, I want to be here. Okay? So this is straight. I'm not doing this. Okay? Again, those are all cheats to feel like you have more power. You have to develop the skill in the body to be able to have tremendous power to generate through the weapon. So these are just a few things I wanted to go over in terms of handling the bow. Basic, the grips and positioning of the hands, all right? Some other things you can do in terms of your bow training. Try doing your bow kata without changing grips. This is just a mental exercise as much as it is physical. So try doing the whole bow kata without changing grips, okay? Another thing you can do is you can also need to realize that the bow is sometimes elongated, right? So we have these techniques in Shishin-no-kun in Isshin-Ryu. We also have them in Matayoshi Kobudo and Shoin-no-kun and some of the other kata. So we want to understand how to elongate the bow and work with it from further extension, okay? So you can also do that, all right? And you can actually work your bow kata where on all your strikes you elongate the weapon. So for instance, if I was doing that in Tokumini no Kun, I'd be here, my hand would slide back, now I'd be doing a very long strike, very long strike, very long strike. Now I come back to my third and a third for my block. Now I might come here and extend it and do a long strike. I might come here and do a long strike. Now I change my grip and now I'm back to my original position. So again, this is a good exercise to do to try to, again, elevate your ability with the weapon. It doesn't matter what kata. You can try it on all the kata. And some kata, the moves will not allow you to not change your grip. But that's okay. But other kata, you could do the whole form without changing your grip, with making little to no adjustment. So these are good exercises to try. Like for myself, in Isshin-Ryu, I'm doing Tokumini no Kun, probably 42 years, all right? 41 years, whatever it is. Like anything else, just doing the same thing over and over and not trying to elevate it and get it in a different way is boring. So instead of being boring, experiment with some stuff. when you experiment with these things and then you go back and practice your bow kata in the so-called normal way, you might realize some things about your bow kata that need to be fixed. So just some final things. You have to put the power in the part of the weapon that's hitting your opponent. You have to make sure your hands are where they're supposed to be based upon your height with the weapon. So again, same thing as if I have a student who's 6'5", so 6'2" rather, his bow is 6'5". All right. So another good thing to do is sometimes practice with a longer bow. Okay. The other thing too is I'm using my Shiredo bow right here, which is tapered, but I also plenty of times use a straight bow. Okay. I use a straight bow. Again, I think either way, whatever you like and whatever you feel comfortable with is good. Just as an aside, I also practice Katori Shinto-Ryu, which is a very ancient Japanese martial art, which also has bojutsu, and they use the bow mostly from one end. So the techniques are very different. All right. So that's also helped to give me some insight, though, the differences between the way the Japanese or the Chinese might use the staff and how the Okinawans use it. Okay, so, all right. So again, I just wanted to make this little video to go over some basic grip stuff with the bow and just some things to point out that I hope will help some people. If anyone has questions, you can contact me via Facebook. All right, everybody knows through the IWK webpage or any of my Facebook pages. You can ask me questions. If there's something you'd like to see me explain on a video, by all means, send me what you'd like to do, and maybe I'll do it, and I'll do it for the future. All right. I hope this helps. Like I said, if there's any questions on anything particular, I can always make another short video. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.